Marvel Rivals has finally hit the scene, shaking up the hero shooter genre, and I want to take a look at some of the hero designs in this game. I'm going to be comparing them to some of their Overwatch counterparts to see, does Overwatch have the better design philosophy, or has Marvel Rivals improved upon it since those characters came out in that game? We are going to look at characters that are not exactly one-to-one, because there are no characters that are like that, but very similar to that. General play style being the same, lots of overlapping moves, that kind of stuff, right? I think there's a lot of stuff you could say are similar, like Star-Lord is, Tracer 76 is what I like to call him. I'm not going to include that type of character, kind of like a hybrid character. I want to include the characters that are pretty one-to-one, as close as possible to another character in the game. Some of which are super similar, others which are maybe not even in the same role. But I've got 10 for you here today. We're just gonna go down the list, and we are gonna then rate, which characters do they actually, which characters are better in Rivals and which characters are better in Overwatch. And just kind of see who wins in that department, So first up is going to be Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, aka Winston, right? So with this character, he has got a leap. He's a dive character. He goes in, he's super melee range, he just kind of hits you up close, everything like that. And then he has a shield ability, which he pops. That is not the shield. He pops the shield ability, that's the bubble, right? That lets him be in the fight. It lets his allies be in the fight. He makes a lot of space, and then his allies kind of take advantage of the space that he creates. Also, I guess I should say no team ups, right? We're going to be doing these characters without team ups because obviously Overwatch doesn't have any of that. And it's kind of a strange thing to take into consideration. And of course, don't forget with Hulk, he has an ultimate ability where he gets a bunch of health that allows him to stay in fights longer and knock people around. That's Winston. That's very, very close to Winston. Now, Hulk has a couple of extra flair to his kit. He's got the clap, which is kind of like Winston's right click, although it does more damage, and is more of a combo tool with the cleave. And he also has the stun, the exile, which is an ability that allows him to stun somebody and then choose when he wants them to be unstunned after a couple of seconds. So it's really strange. And also Hulk is typically more mobile since he can hold up his jump. It's kind of like a passive, basically, that he gets to have this jump as well. So, they're pretty similar in my opinion. I think this is one of the closest one-to-one comparisons, at least in playstyle. Of course, there's a couple of extra abilities, some extra flair. Hulk can grab people with his jump as well. But I want to kind of like break down the differences between these characters, because when it comes to the both of them, I think that Winston is just much more better well-rounded. And I think he's much more consistently fun, because the thing about Hulk is that he is very, very limited, and he has no way to, yes, he has his bubble, but it's a much more linear ability. I don't think it's as interesting. It's mainly just timing. He just kind of gives it to himself and allies and just kind of no thought about it, whereas Winston has to think about the positioning and the timing of his bubble, and then once it's down, he has a lot of different ways he can actually play around it, kind of dance around it. Maybe he uses it to block off sight lines, maybe he uses it much more aggressively, stuff like that. I think Hulk does not nearly have those dynamics with it, and I think that is kind of where Hulk suffers in the gameplay department. Hulk also just kind of feels a little clunky. Now, I'm not going to be talking about game feel too much, because in general, Rivals is going to feel a little clunkier than Overwatch. That's no fault of their own. Hulk is just much more combo oriented, right? I think that is like a very big part where you're trying to figure out the stun and like when to leave people and when to kind of like come back, when to combo and all of that. But at the same time, especially with his stun, you can stun somebody, and since you're the only one who can interact with them when they're stunned, it can actually feel really bad for your teammates, because they'll be trying to do something like, I can't tell you how many times I've been on Black Panther, trying to get a dash reset on somebody. All of a sudden my Hulk stuns them, completely invulnerable, completely messes up what I'm trying to do. Because I guess there's like some arbitrary reason why I'm not allowed to interact with them while they're stunned. So Yeah, I actually don't think Hulk is a terrible design for the tank, and the more that you kind of play him and get used to him, he's actually a little better than he leads on. I think he's really good in team play, but I think Winston is really better overall, much better like compositions, right? I think Hulk needs a couple of really specific combos to make work. I don't think Winston is like that at all. I think he's a lot much more flexible, and there's a lot more depth to the individual abilities, right? Like Hulk has a lot of stuff going on, but I feel like he's not as I don't see he's close, but I don't think he has that much depth as Winston does with how you use them. Also, his ult is just kind of not as fun. The primals are not real, unlike Winston, who we all love. So for me, that one is going to go to Overwatch in that department. But let's go to the next dive tank here. We have Venom, and this is a pretty, like, honestly, I know Hulk and Winston are pretty close, but honestly, Venom and Wrecking Ball are probably the closest in terms of abilities, maybe in this entire game. Basically what they have the grapple. You can grapple very fast in this game on Venom. Then you have the dive that can only activate at longer ranges. Obviously, this one is a little more long range, and it is not stoppable once it is started. That is also something to note about it. He has a shield ability that only affects himself and is conditional. So for Wrecking Ball, it's his adaptive shields. He gets more when you have more people around, but Venom just gets more the closer or the lower he is health wise. I believe it's just up to a max of 900. So depending on where you are, unless you're like above 900 health, then you get like a flat bonus. But yeah, that's kind of like how Venom works. He gets more the more you are what's it called? The lower you are. That's just the gist of it, right? And then Venom also just has this right click, which is just kind of like a little bit of a slow, little bit of extra damage, and that's about it. Venom is closer range because he doesn't have what's it called, hit scan, which is something that's interesting to note. And of course, he can set up with these wall runs and, you know, run around on the walls and everything, which Wrecking Ball cannot do. The thing about Venom, and although I really do like playing Venom, I believe his game plan to be much more linear than Wrecking Ball. Particularly in his engages, what I find with Venom is that since, you know, his grapple, or you don't need his grapple to set up. In fact, you should never use his grapple to set up, in my opinion. You should always just try to get on a wall and just stay here. You can stay in like any really safe position, and then since his dive just goes so far, you're like always guaranteed to happen. You're never gonna get canceled out of your dive. So you're just gonna wait for them to come into the choke. You're gonna go hit them. You're gonna do this. They're gonna look at you. The second that you get down to like sub 100, you hit your shield. And then that's it, right? There's really no decision making a lot with this character. I think Wrecking Ball, there's so many different ways you could set up, so many different ways to combo your abilities to try and get the most value out of Fireball. Maybe you don't need Fireball at all. Maybe you're just trying to go for a knockback kill instead. Maybe mid fight you're trying to like chase with your Fireball as well. You know, there's a lot more to it. I think Venom's combos are very linear because you do this and you just try and stay close to them. Wrecking Ball has a lot more room to work there. Their ults are pretty different, which is Venom's is just basically another shield, and then Wrecking Ball has mines, which I hate mines. I don't think it's a very well designed ability, but Venom's is not particularly interesting. It's just like another refresh button. Pretty whatever, right? So even though I do like playing Venom, I think that Wrecking Ball just has so much more depth and mechanical skill, right? Venom is very easy. They make everything about this character super easy, but Venom can't be like interrupted, where Wrecking Ball Slam can be, right? And it isn't always the best to engage with Slam. Maybe you just engage with your Fireball, and Wrecking Ball or Venom just doesn't really have that type of option. In fact, it's probably much worse for you to just get in there and like start hitting people and then try to find a way to slam in. Like, there's really no need for it. You kind of want to hit them that burst damage whenever possible. So again, I think this one is definitely going to go to Overwatch, because I think that dive tank equivalent is just more interesting in Wrecking Ball's design, and Venom is sorely lacking. Now, next year, I kind of debated about whether I would do Strange or Magneto, but ultimately, we're going to do Magneto with Sigma. just because he's got a little more to work with. So his primary fire is pretty similar to Sigma's. It kind of goes a certain distance and then it explodes. He has a shield which kind of goes out in front of it. It's actually on a resource now, which is new. I'm actually refilming this video because I actually did not know Magneto got all this new stuff. But yes, his shield is on a resource now, so even though it's a personal shield, it's closer to Sigma's where it's only from himself. So it's less so about saving his allies and really more kind of blocking incoming damage from himself. He has a knockback ability that like that, it just killed there, but it's like a knockback ability, kind of like accretion. It just knocks back instead of stunning, does a little bit more damage, maybe, I believe. And then he also just has Zarya Bubble for, whatever reason. That is what is going to, what's it called? Strengthen his rock ability, right? So you'll do this, and then you'll use either your Self Bubble or your Zarya Bubble, and then you'll get more charge from it, so you might be able to use it again, right? So you're going to be able to use that ability much more often. It actually just depends on how much charge you have. So there is a bit of nuance there, but the thing that I find with Magneto is that, yes, he's really fun. Also their ults, like, they both have ways to, like, deny space, because this eats, like, kinetic grasp, and also can just do, like, major damage in an AoE area. Just, baseline similarities. They're pretty different overall, but, he kind of has, like, a suck equivalent that is definitely much better. So when I think about Magneto, I think this character is actually pretty fun, although he is relatively simple for this game. That is definitely not a problem, and I think his limitations are good, especially, like, with this shield not being as good. It definitely is not as good as I think it was in the beta. It's definitely more usable in a lot of places, but overall strength has come down. The thing about Sigma, though, is that since his shield is much more active and you can leave it places, it leaves so much more creativity with how you use it, how you block off angles, how you use it for yourself, how you use it for allies, how you dance around it. It's just such a more engaging tool, and it's also really engaging because you can break it. You can shoot it as an enemy, and he has to play around that, right? That's a really good gameplay loop for Sigma. Sigma also has a really good gameplay loop in his hyper spears because he can bank them. He's trying to use the geometry and get them around. Magneto's, unfortunately, is just much more linear than that. You just kind of have to get into position and hit them. Which I think is a bit of a loss. Now, managing your rock on Magneto, I think, does give him a nice gameplay loop as well, but having rock up as more often just kind of makes it feel less impactful. Like when you hit a really big accretion, since you get that big stun, I think it does feel really good, and it lets you make plays pretty frequently on Sigma, where I don't think this, having a little bit of a knockback, it just isn't as useful in that regard, right? And it has to be full charge for the knockback anyway. So it just isn't as useful to me of like, oh, I think I can really make plays with this ability. Not really. It just feels like more extra burst damage instead of feeling like a really substantial ability that I like. Do you see how like little that guy was knocked back? Not much there at all. So I think Magneto is fun, and he's very similar to Sigma, but let's be real, I do think Sigma is just on the whole more interesting. Yes, I think Sigma suck can be frustrating, his self-survivability, which Magneto definitely still has, by the way, because he can bubble himself. And there's no counter to bubble, you just kind of have to like take it. Because, again, Sigma's suck can be beamed, he can be stunned out of it, there's stuff you can do. Magneto's not so much. So I think overall, those are the 3 tanks I had. 0 for 3 for Marvel Rivals, at least in comparison to Overwatch. I do think that we take Overwatch tanks a little for granted, because once we get, to their, similar characters, you really do see the nuances and the fun stuff of Overwatch tanks more, even in some of those frustrating ones, specifically how Sigma has had a bit of a tough history. But the same cannot be said for the DPS cast, because I think that's where they have really done a lot. So starting with Hawkeye here, let's talk about Hanzo, right? Hanzo's pretty, one-shot bow character. He's got the leap, which Hanzo has the double jump, and then Hanzo also has Sonic Arrow, which just reveals enemies, and he has Storm Arrow, which gives him a little bit of like little bit of like shield pressure and stuff. But for the most part, Hanzo is pretty simple. He's wall climbing, you know, he's trying to find angles and trying to find a cheeky one-shot kill. Hawkeye is doing very much the same thing, although he's doing it in a different way. Now, the big difference between them is that Hawkeye actually doesn't have full damage unless you are looking at the character. So I'm going to just hold up my bow and then hit, that's a headshot, 0 charge. It actually doesn't kill. In fact, I have to be tracking onto them for a decent amount of time in order to get a headshot. Now, I think it might be a little overtuned right now, but in theory, I think this is a really good way to make the sniper character not as frustrating while allowing that one shot. It puts a lot of skill in there. And again, I don't think it's balanced pretty well. I think it's very easy to get value out of this, but in theory, I think this is really good. Hawkeye's also got, instead of having wall climb, all of his re-engagement tool, or sorry, mobility tools is in double jump. So you're actually trying to make decisions about, do I use double jump to reposition? Do I use double jump maybe as an extra safety ability? So I think there's actually a lot of decision making to his movement as well. Like, oh, maybe I try and like chase somebody down, or maybe I'd use it while I'm retreating. And you don't have, you have it up fairly often, basically as often as leap. But you know, I think it's really fun trying to use this ability. Just it having vertical and horizontal momentum, it makes it really nice. And on top of that, you have a way to get off me tool that is much less up often. So now you're kind of trying to make a decision like, what if I just use my, somebody dives me, maybe I can just like slash them and do that. Or maybe I really need to get out of there, so I'm just going to double jump, and then when they hit me again, then I do that, There's decisions you have to make. I think that's a really good gameplay flow. And I actually think his other ability as well is pretty interesting. I actually really do like this Sonic Arrow, because it's not instant damage. Like, it can do really big damage, but it has to apply over like a second or two. Unlike Storm Arrow, which can like really burst somebody down, that one is really more for cleave and can be really good against kind of like brawlier grouped up compositions. Although I don't think it is like perfectly, perfect, right? So overall, you might be thinking like, oh wow, this character is just so much better than Hanzo, right? Well, let's talk about his ult, because I think his ult is like a stain on this character's design. Because after image it's BS. It is so strange. Also, I just don't understand how it works sometimes. The after images just kind of go away. But yes, there's no counterplay to that. You just shoot their after image. No, you can't do headshot damage, but I think it is BS to just do like 200 damage to somebody who literally is not in your sightline anymore. And there's nothing they can do about that. I am not a big fan of that, even though there is some fun like synergy with his kit where you can hit multiple after images with this ability and do a lot of big damage. Again, it's just not very fun. Like, I think Dragon Strike is a much better designed ultimate. But overall though, Hanzo, Hawkeye, whatever his name is, Hawkeye, I think is much better than Hanzo. I think he is much more interesting. And while his power definitely seems a little too skewed right now, I see a lot more potential with this character rather other than Hanzo, because I think his other abilities and the way that you set up yourself is much more interesting, and there's a lot more nuance there as well. So very good on Marvel Rivals of making the bow sniper interesting again. So going on from there, we are going to talk about Squirrel Girl. Now, Squirrel Girl is basically Junkrat. She has what's it called? A ricocheting, exploding acorn. That is her primary fire, just like Junkrat. She doesn't have much. She actually does have a decent amount in her clip, but the idea is that, you will have to reload eventually. You're going to be spamming down chokes, and she also has a stun ability. Junkrat has his trap. She has her acorn. Junkrat can mine himself. Her equivalent is that she has her jump, where that is where her movement comes in, so she can be pretty mobile. And Junkrat makes decisions with mine about using it for damage or using it for mobility, right? Squirrel Girl has something like that too. She has her refresh, her ability refresh. So let me say I see that guy, I want to chase him. I'm going to do this. Oh, I missed. I'm going to refresh because I'm gonna use my other ability and refresh, and then I'm gonna jump again and like try and chase it down. Or maybe I want to stop somebody, right? And I want to make sure I can get like a big root. So I refresh my acorn and then I try and root them again, try and keep them in position. That's really good decision management. And the reason I like that more than mines is because you're not guaranteed value out of both of them. This jump is not the best movement tool ever. It is pretty good, but it does leave you pretty vulnerable. And the acorn takes a second to charge up and root, and you do have to hit the skill shot, which is really big. I don't think there is as much free value on this character as Junkrat, although I will say a lot of her damage is loaded in the burst radius instead of the like hitting them directly. There's a lot of splash damage, so you can really kill a lot of grouped up characters. That is something to take note of. But yeah, I think Squirrel Girl is really interesting because it takes that idea of like rooting somebody or trapping them and puts a lot more skill and just like really fun gameplay loop into it, because now I'm trying to figure out like, mines I think are a lot more linear. But with Squirrel Girl, I'm always like, okay, what is the best way I can like reuse my abilities, right? Is it worth it for me to like refresh and go for another acorn? Or do I go for another leap, right? Because once you refresh, like you only have a second or two to make your decision. So you do have to be making them on the fly. And I think that is really good. Her ult is, the Stampede, I don't think it is very good overall, and I think that's fine because I think Tyre is really frustrating, and I think Tyre just like lives rent-free in your mind, and that's kind of the point. But the squirrels, I think, actually kind of combine with her kit a little better, and I find it to be a much more interesting ult. And you actually can shoot them. I don't think it's a good idea to shoot them. I don't think they're that menacing. So I wouldn't. But I definitely think Squirrel Girl is a much more interactive design than Junkrat. And actually, there's a lot of skill here as well that isn't just, Junkrat doing crazy mobility, right? Like they take the skill out of the mobility execution and put it into more decision making. And I really like that about her. So I like Squirrel Girl a lot more than him. All right, Black Widow. I think it's pretty obvious who this character is. This is your hit scan sniper. She does not one shot. That is really good because this allows Black Widow to do a lot more stuff. This allows her to have this super high mobility, be like a super flanker, and not be extremely frustrating, because if you are at full health, she is not going to be able to kill you. And damage boosts are hard-coded specifically on Widowmaker not to allow one-shots. I say Widowmaker. On Black Widow, not to allow one-shots. That is a crazy change or idea that they have, and I think that means that while I think she's pretty weak, she's not frustrating, or as frustrating, right? She is still a hit scan sniper with a lot of burst. She just has more to work with, right? It's really fun to jump around and be mobile. And she also has, similar like get off me tools, right? Like Widow has grapple, but she has like way more mobility all the time. So when she's escaping, she's much more likely to get like an actual good kill or get it like good damage to get off her, right? She also has the kick, which is a pretty underwhelming move in my opinion, but it does have the interesting like, grapple back. It's supposed to be a get off me tool. I don't think it is very good, and I think that's the point. Like Widow should be using her mobility more so. That's kind of like a if all else fails. So are these, right? The melees. They aren't as what's it called? They aren't as useful. Now her ult is, not Infrasight. She puts this on the ground, and now she, it's a slow, and you can basically one-shot after it, although there's a big delay. It's not a great ult. I don't quite understand. Like, it feels like this character is like a semi-Quake character, in my opinion, the way that she bounces around and does that explosion and tries to get, like, the sniper shots from the hip and all of that. But it's better than Infrasight, because Infrasight is just like, well, we just have to sit here and wait for 15 seconds because Widow can one-shot us. So although I don't know if I'm like super crazy about her design overall, I think Black Widow is just, it's a better evolution of the hit scan sniper. than Widow has been, because Widow has largely remained untouched, and I think Marvel Rivals has learned from their mistake. So I will just give it to Marvel Rivals, even though I don't think this is the most cohesive design in the game. It is still definitely better than what we have with Widowmaker. So that's 3 and 3. Going on now, we have Iron Man. So Iron Man definitely plays a lot like old Farah, in the fact that he is a permanent flyer, and he cannot, like, he literally cannot touch the ground regularly. And this is what he can do. He can find him some nice vertical cover and just do this. And get a lot of splash damage. Now, I think you do get bonus damage. Yeah, you get a lot more bonus damage for hitting directly, which I think actually was not in the game earlier. He's been kind of weak in this build. But that does not stop the fact that he does this. And then he powers up, and then he does this. You know? And he does more damage. This is just like the absolute worst of Farah. Just uncounter. There are some spots where he can just sit there and like no one can even like get up to him. You know, like if this were a real map, who would even be able to like realistically deal with me up here? You know what I mean? It's such a super extreme. And then when you get close to him, he's got this beam, which I think just does way too much damage. That he can just, you know, and it gets super powered when he's in this mode as well, which is super long. And yeah, it's just, there's so much cleave, right? Like, so Farah is much more mobile now, and she's kind of encouraged to be mobile, and she can be shot out of the air, and it's like, you know, risk versus reward. She's got lower health now. Iron Man is just, he's slow, but he can rearrange himself very quickly as well. He never has to get anywhere close. Do not trust this ability. It's worthless. Don't even use it. Don't even try. Iron Man will never get anywhere close to you. It's super duper duper frustrating, even if it's not very good. And his ult is like, you know, Barrage has risk involved. This one, not nearly as much. But then again, the further back you are, the less likely it is to hit and actually kill somebody. So like, I'm not like, whatever. The ult's just pretty boring, right? I think, I think they really do not have it with Iron Man. I think this is not the way to do a flyer. Perma-flyer is a crazy idea to me, especially one with splash damage like this, that it just does not seem correct, right? There's not as much aim skill required on this hero. Definitely Farah wins this. Although Farah is not a great design, Iron Man is just a complete disaster, in my opinion. So, going forward, we actually have Scarlet Witch, who is going to be Moira. Now, they are not in the same category, but they have the Suck ability, and they both have Fade of some variety. Scarlet Witch has more flair in her kit. Obviously, she's not a healer, so she has a stun, which is the single most frustrating stun in the game. You get hit by it because it can hit you multiple times. I don't like it at all. But she also has a skill shot where she has to kind of manage her resource, and she gets it back quicker when she hits people with her Suck. This design really... It's really boring, you know, like you just kind of suck and you hit the skill shot and that's it, right? Like you can just kind of hit this and this, and yes, it does have a skill shot, which is more than Moira can say, but she does have 2 fades, which is, you know, not fun. That's pretty frustrating. Her ability, this, is just so frustrating to get hit by. You can get hit by it multiple times and it just completely stops you. Her ult is it's very hard to use. It's not very good. Moira's is definitely more useful, and you can like cancel. I mean, you can cancel both of them, but Moira's is definitely much more useful. But also, I don't know. So basically, the way that I see these characters is that at least with Scarlet Witch Fade, you can see exactly where she's going the entire time. She's not very fast. She has a skill shot involved, and I just don't think she's as frustrating to pin down. Like, I think it's not very fun to fight against her with some of these abilities, but at the same time, she has, you know, a couple of things that we kind of want out of Moira: a little more utility, a little more playmaking potential, a little more mechanical skill. So I struggle with this one. This one's like super on the fence for me. They both have resource management, although I think Moira's is actually much more interesting because, you know, she just has way too many right clicks for it to actually feel worthwhile to call a resource. So although I've really gone back and forth on this one, I'm just going to give the slight edge to Scarlet Witch just because of the mechanical skill, the playmaking. Although it's like, honestly, it's like super neck and neck. So from there, I believe that is 4-4. So I have 2 more characters for you guys. Next is, okay, just don't do it. Next is Namor. Namor is Torbjorn. And I'm actually going to make a video about the turret characters in this game because I think they're really interesting compared to Overwatch. But we're going to do the direct one-to-one comparison here. His spear is very similar to Cheetah's. Projectile, high damage, right? Excuse me. He can put down 2 turrets. Because he puts down turrets, they automatically hit. But the thing about him is that he has a right click that he can augment his damage with the right click. But then also, oh, the turrets don't even stay all the time. I didn't know that. But he also can then command his turrets to do more damage and actually be better. So, he has much more interaction with the turrets as well, which I think is a really big thing. Also, he has like an anti-dive tool, but it can be a reposition tool at the same time. Torb's anti-dive tool is just hit a button, get over health, and be better. Where Namor, I think, has a lot more aim skill. You know, you can't really mess up your abilities or you're going to be losing out on a lot of damage, while Torb pops overload and just gets this super damage boost. I think there's more options in theory with this one because you can use it to reposition. Although it's not the most engaging ability in the world, let's be real. And then for the olds, Torb's is much more place and forget. Namor's, you actually have to like make sure you're placing it in the right spot. It's actually hard to get value out of because it's easy to react to, but you do get a lot. If you're able to hit it, you get a lot of value out of it. I like it more than Torb's ult. I think Molten Core is just like unfun to fight. It's pretty uninteresting, right? So yeah, I really just want to highlight just the fact that you can really interact with your turrets is why I do really like this character. He has 2. He has them up more often, so he's kind of like encouraged to actually place them in different spots, even though he is like kind of sit back and spam. He does not have that much range on his turrets, so he has to kind of walk around the map to try and get them on off angles, put himself potentially in a bad spot, which I don't think Torb really has to do to the same extent, especially since they go away, like unlike Torb's where you have to kill them. So with that being said, Namor is not the most interesting character in the game, but I definitely think he's much better than Torbjorn. I think he's more interesting. I would much rather play this character over Torb any day. So that is 1 more for Rivals. That is 4-5 overall. Let's go to the final character. The only strategist I think is actually comparable to somebody else in the roster. We're going to talk about Adam Warlock. Now, Adam Warlock does have a lot of rezzing. That is not what we're talking about. That is not what he plays like. Adam Warlock is the Glass Cannon Zenyatta character. He's got high damage. He's got a right click that is literally Zenyatta right click, although he can't headshot. And instead of orbs, he just looks at you and then he heals multiple people basically up to full with the click of a button. No aim skill at all. So Warlock has really frustrating burst healing. He's got really frustrating abilities in general. And for a character that is supposed to be a glass cannon, supposed to be super diveable, you know, you can just do this and heal yourself up. Or look at the ground and heal yourself up just like that. And then you soul bond with other people and then you heal everybody up together. And that includes yourself. And then of course you have your self res and the team res, right? Zenyatta saves his team with a good transcendence. This guy saves his team by letting them all die, having them all come back, letting himself die, you know, stuff like that. I think Adam Warlock is super frustrating. Just, it's a character that has so many more tools than you probably think he shouldn't have. He has such easy, frustrating bursts that you just can't outplay. It's like Brig Pack on crack cocaine on Zenyatta of all characters, right? I really think that Adam Warlock is a super flawed design. And I'm trying not to talk about his res too much because that just Zenyatta just doesn't have anything like that. But again, for a glass cannon character, I think having all the resurrect abilities just doesn't make as much sense. He should live or die by, you know, what's it called? By his, you know, ability to aim and his ability to make plays. Like, I think Zenyatta could have maybe a little more utility in his kit. Discord has its own bevy of problems, but Adam Warlock is kind of an abomination in my mind of just super frustrating support design that this game has a lot of, unfortunately. So with that being said, at the end of the day, that's 5 and 5. What is clear to me, at least when running this pretty informal look, is that the duelist design in Rivals is actually really interesting, and it makes sense that there's so many of them because I think that they are, for the most part, pretty fun, pretty engaging. There's a couple of things here and there I don't like, but the duelists really have the sauce. The tanks, however, just kind of don't. They don't feel as interesting to use. They don't feel as good to use compared to Overwatch, and the strategists have a lot of really frustrating things on them. There are some characters I really like Loki, but for the most part, I think most of them are either kind of boring or just kind of overall just too much, right? There's also a lot of characters in this game that do what I like to call junk, where you're just hitting buttons all the time because you have so much stuff, right? Like Scarlet Witch is a good example because she has 4 of those right clicks that she can build up very quickly, so she's just always right clicking, and it's like, what's the point of a resource character if you're always going to have it up? Mantis is the same way with resource, where she's just constantly getting her seeds back, and she's just always like, you get a damage boost, you get a damage boost, you get a damage boost, but it doesn't really like feel active as much. Groot is just throwing down walls and breaking them at all times. He's always just hitting buttons, and it just feels like you aren't really actively thinking about every individual thing you do, which I find to be a bit of a problem, and I don't find that to be as much of an issue with most of the DPS cast, although Iron Man over here, Iron Fist, definitely is a crazy design, which I'll probably talk about in later videos about some of the dregs of this category or of this game. But that is my thoughts, guys. I like Marvel Rivals a lot, and I don't think Overwatch or Marvel Rivals is better than the other. I think Marvel Rivals has a lot of merit on its own. I am going to compare them a lot because there is a lot of DNA shared between them, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be playing both of them probably for a while. Overwatch will be my main game, I guess, for a while, but you know, I will be playing a lot of Marvels, especially right now because I'm kind of hooked on it. It's just fun. I think there's a lot of interesting characters in this game. So that is what I think, but I want to hear what you guys think. Please, down below, before you do that, please subscribe if you want to see more Marvel Rivals content and Overwatch stuff. I am planning to do a couple of videos comparing Overwatch designs to Marvel Rivals designs a little more in like coherently, right? Like I want to talk about the turret character and what Marvel Rivals does right compared to what they didn't do right. But I want to hear back from you guys. Do you want to see just straight up Marvel Rivals stuff, or do you want to see how it relates to Overwatch? Or maybe Marvel Rivals isn't really what you want to see from this channel. You want me to focus more on Overwatch. I do want to hear back from you guys. I really appreciate it. Like this video while you're at it if you did like it. And I stream live, twitch.tv/LaneHemingway, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. I will be playing Overwatch and Marvel Rivals off and on, especially going into the new year, and discussing stuff. Okay, Adam, thank you. And discussing stuff live that you can talk to me about as well. And join my Discord down below if you want Overwatch or Marvel Rivals stuff to talk about. I have some communities in there as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please have a good day.